Hi and welcome to this week's Wu Wei Wisdom Life Lessons teaching. It's great to be back with you all. This week we are asking the question, is your self-talk harming you? Now, a lot of people have this negative, critical inner dialogue going on every waking hour and they don't even realize it. So in this teaching, you'll learn how to spot it and how to stop it. Okay, David, so negative self-talk, how do we spot it? What is it?
Well, you're right, it's hard to spot because for a lot of us, we are so familiar in doing it, running the dialogue. So the way that I would ask you to spot it in our model is, have you ever said to yourself, I'm not good enough, I can't cope, I'm unlovable or I'm unworthy? Have you ever being judgmental about yourself or self-doubting? And then this is the dialogue of self-talk that's going on. And you're absolutely right, Alex. Many of my clients have just accepted it. And some of them even say to me, well, it's natural. It's not natural. It is a choice that you're making to run this constant dialogue of self-talk, of bringing yourself down or putting other people above you.
And I know, David, we've done a couple of long-form teachings on the idea of the CCJ, comparing, criticizing, being judgmental, and the three lies that we tell ourselves. I'm not good enough, I'm not lovable, I can't cope. That's all a kind of negative narrative.
Yes.
But I think one of the things I wanted to tease out in this teaching in particular is why it's so harmful. Because a lot of people think just because it goes on in the background in my mind, in my subconscious mind even, then it doesn't matter so much. But that's completely wrong, isn't it?
Well, I think it's really harmful. I mean, that's why we do these teachings, because if you have this dialogue going on that's always bringing yourself down, it has to affect your life. So I'll give you a normal example that I get from clients. They say, well, isn't it better to think of the worst case scenario because you're better prepared if it's happened? This is what I get from a majority of my clients. And I said, listen to what you've just told me. You think it's better to look at every situation and think of the worst case scenario in case it happens, and you're better prepared? And they say, yes. I say, okay, would you teach that to your physical child? And they smile and go, no, I wouldn't. That's crazy. And there's a great example of when you're giving yourself this self-talk and why it's harmful. Why wouldn't you teach it to your physical child? If you think it's a good idea, if you think it's better to be prepared for the worst situation, you would teach it to your child, wouldn't you? You know it's not a good idea. Somewhere inside of you that I call Shen, you may call it your gut feeling or your intuition or your inner knowing, but we're talking about the same thing. That's spirituality. You're going against that spirituality. And why it's harmful for you, that negative self-talk creates very powerful negative emotions, tension, stress, anxiety, fear. All of these emotions come because you're almost preparing yourself to be fight or flight. So your body's getting ready to fight or flight.
And so, David, I think the point there with using the child analogy is we need to get over this idea of just because this narrative is not spoken out loud, we're not standing in front of the mirror saying, oh, you're rubbish, you're fat, you're stupid, you can't do this, nobody loves you. Just because we're not speaking it out loud doesn't mean it's not impacting us. It's impacting us just as much.
It is, Alex. It's like drinking poison to me. Any self-doubt is like drinking poison. So when you do that, it really affects not only your thinking, not only your decision making, but your physiology of who you are. And so many of my clients will say, once they realize this, and they'll say, well, it's ingrained. This is what I hear. It's ingrained. I'm hardwired. Have you ever said that? Ingrained or hardwired. How can I change this? Well, the first way you change it is by listening to this. Do you do it? Here's the next question. If the answer is yes, I do it, how often do you do it? That's the shock. When you've listened to this teaching, just make a note of yourself. How often, as Alex says, we call it CCJ, how often do you criticize yourself? How often do you compare yourself against others? How often are you negatively judgmental about yourself? I think you'll be amazed how often this, oh, look at me. Oh, I look the same. Oh, I always do this. Oh, I can't do that. Oh, this is too much for me. Oh, I can't cope. Oh, it's because I'm not good enough. And as Alex said, if this dialogue is on repeat in your mind, you actually start believing your own press. And that's why these beliefs that we talk about, what do you believe? Why do you believe it? Is very important, because this affects your life. This affects your roadmap, your journey of your life, the way you're walking, the flow of your life. But it also affects you, I believe strongly, physically. It creates physical problems in your body. When I was working with acupuncture, with clients, it amazed me how many times you would find something physical had a root in emotional.
And David, when we, if the first part of the exercise in terms of stopping it is recognizing when we're doing it, a lot of people say, I don't know that I'm doing it. It just happens without me knowing. Well, I guess the easiest way to spot it is when we catch ourselves experiencing a red light, yes, feeling, an uncomfortable or painful emotion, whether it's anxiety, panic, anger, hopelessness, frustration, anything like that. If we question what's behind that emotion, if we just allow ourselves that little moment of pause and reflection, we will find probably 99.9% of the time there is a little bit of negative inner chatter going on in our subconscious mind that we are now bringing into our conscious awareness, because we're pausing and saying, what's happening right now as I'm experiencing this feeling, or I find myself in this mood. And that inner narrative, when we identify it, that's essentially the cause of the red light emotions.
That's right, Alex. And what you're describing is what we call in our model the golden thread process. So if you're new to this model, the golden thread process is, first of all, and this is really important, do you agree that you are the creator of your emotions and not the victim? Now, I'm not saying you shouldn't have emotions. I'm not saying emotions are wrong. Listen to the teaching. You are the creator of your emotions, not the victim. This is very important, because of lots of my clients, when I ask them that, if they book a session, I say, well, first of all, do we agree? And they go, yes, but. So you can't put the but word in. But in the middle of a sentence means, forget what I've just said. It means you don't agree. So you have to start with that first understanding. Yes, David, I create my emotions. Nothing wrong with emotions. They're natural, normal, make us human beings, but I create them. Then that puts you at the top of the golden thread. So as Alex has just said, if you create what I call a red light emotion, I don't like using the words like anxiety and fear. I prefer to give it a general name, the red light emotions. Then you ask yourself, why? Why have I just created the red light emotion? It's like a self-inquiry. If I've created the emotion, and I've created stress. Why have I created stress? Now that takes you down the golden thread process, and we've done several videos on describing as how you do this, but it's basically a self-inquiry, moving away from the emotions, understanding emotions are the consequences, and we're trying to find the belief and the thoughts that create the emotions. And then you get down. Now you'll start to hear the self-chatter.
Yeah.
Now you'll start to hear, well, it's because I'm not good enough. Oh, it's because I can't cope. Oh, it's because I'm not worthy. Oh, it's because this is one thing, I always get things wrong. It never works out for me. It always blows up as in my face. And this is the self-talk. If this dialogue is going on all of the time, it's affecting you. It has to affect you. And the golden thread process shows you that it's affecting you. Because if you're constantly creating, and here's another thing my clients will say, I always have like a underground, constant negative emotion, David.
Like a background noise.
Background, that's the word I was looking for, Alex. Thank you. It's always like I'm never free of this background noise. That's the word I was looking for. And this is the reason why. Because you're running, it's like you've got this on loop. And this self-talk is actually affecting your life on so many levels. And it's so important to understand this.
And so, David, where we've got to is using our red light emotions to help us identify when the negative inner dialogue may be going on. Taking time to just pause and make that connection and ask the question, what am I thinking or believing right now, which is creating these red light emotions. So now we've brought the self-talk into our conscious awareness.
Yes.
Even just in doing that short bit of the process, we're already slowing down the momentum and the energy of the negative self-talk, because we're now becoming more mindful of what's going on inside of us, inside of our head, inside of our body. So we're already benefiting ourselves by even doing those first few short steps. We're slowing down rather than, I always think of it, it's almost like a snowball gaining momentum, rolling down the side of the mountain. If we just allow the self-talk to continue as the background narrative and don't even question it, the snowball of the self-talk just gains more and more and more and more momentum, and it gets bigger and more uncontrollable. So by doing that initial questioning process, it's like we're stopping the snowball or the boulder or the rock close to the top of the mountain when it hasn't built up as much energy. It's more controllable.
That's right, Alex. There's a great analogy. If you had a car at the top of the hill and took the handbrake off, you could hold the car with one finger. Stand at the bottom of the hill when the car's coming at you at 30 miles an hour and it will wipe you out. And that's your analogy. It's a great analogy. And that's why the golden thread process is such a powerful process and something you can do for yourself. You don't have to go to a therapist. You can do this yourself. Once you understand, I create my red light emotions, right? I've just created a red light emotion. Don't give it a name, stress, anxiety. I've chosen to create a red light emotion. Why? Why have I chosen? What is the thought? What is the belief? And there's normally only about, you have to go down. It's like, we call it the golden thread process. I always like what Alex says. It's like that fairy story where you're following the breadcrumbs. So why do I think that? So why do I think that? And it goes down, and you can do it yourself. You can write it down if you like, write it down. And you can start, and then it will come down to the core belief. The Chinese call this the fountainhead. I call it the first domino. If you've ever seen that on television, when you hit a domino and all the dominoes spread out, we want to find the first one, the first belief that begins all this negative self-talk. And this is why the golden thread process is so important. Can I explain to you what you do when you get there? Because this is what I get from a lot of clients. They'll say, in our community, I've done the golden thread, I've found my belief, and then they tell me a belief, and it's one of the 3 lies. I'm not good enough. I can't cope. I'm unlovable. That's what they call the first domino. And then all of the self-talk, nitter-natter go on. And if you're not sure what I'm talking about is even now, I call it the 3 a.m. mind. Have you ever woken up in the middle of the night about 3 a.m. and you hear that talk? When has that talk ever said to you, aren't you great? Look at you. You're looking fine. Tomorrow's going to be a great day for you. You're going to do really well. It never says that. It fills with this negativity. Tomorrow's going to be a problem. You're not getting enough sleep. You won't be able to cope with tomorrow unless you go. It'll give you all that negative self-talk. That's what we're talking about. So when you go back to the first domino, the fountainhead, then it's very simple. Stop lying to yourself. Stop it. If you've ever said, I'm not good enough, I can't cope, I'm unlovable, or I'm unworthy, you are lying to yourself. And that's why it's a spiritual teaching. If you value yourself, your truth, your honesty, and your integrity, tell the truth. The idea of you not being good enough, to me, is nonsensical. The idea of you not being able to cope is frankly laughable. You've always coped. And the idea of not being lovable, come on, you are a divine, awesome spiritual being. So if that first domino is wrong, then the background chatter that we're talking about is setting a negative line of dominoes. And then what you do, and this again is my clients, you dismiss all the good things that happen in your life, and you focus on the negative, which confirm the first domino.
Yeah. I mean, I think, David, the thing that everyone will resist, or a lot of people will resist in what you've just said, is that, yeah, okay, I can see spiritually, I am good enough, I'm unlovable, I can cope. But
there's the but. I was waiting for the but.
My inner child, my ego, the part of my mind that is the source of this criticism, self-judgment, believes it. My inner child believes the lies. Yeah. How can I change that?
Right. Why? So we do the golden thread again. See? What Alex has just explained is exactly what clients say to me. So we start now is, okay, so why do you believe it? Now, what you'll find, and again, I can't say 100% because obviously there's always differences, but I would say the vast majority of my clients who have been suffering for all of their lives with emotional torment, they've been imprisoned with emotions. So when you trace that back from the inner child and you get down to the core belief, it's not even their belief. They've never sat there and think, you know what? This is what I believe and this is why I believe it. It's somebody else's belief. It's something that they've inherited. How many times have you heard somebody say, I'm just like my father, I'm just like my mother, and you adopt other people's beliefs without scrutinizing them and thinking about them, or it's what you believe they believe. They haven't said it, but you think that that's what they believe. Oh, they wouldn't treat me like that. They must believe I'm not good enough. They probably don't believe that at all. They're going through their own problems. But this is why these beliefs are so important. It's often for me when I'm working with a client, it's like you're picking the belief out, kicking and screaming and having a look at it and saying, is that the truth?
Yeah.
And they'll laugh. They go, no, that's not the truth. But you've set up your life based on that truth. And that's a lie. And you've got to clear the lie. And this then clears the chatter. And this then dismisses the harm. And you start living. Because the opposite of living in harm is living in your flow. Wu Wei, being in your flow. So that's the opposite. It's like a fork in the road. You go down the harmful fork, or you go down the fork of flow, of gentleness, of grace, of ease, of authenticity, of truth and honesty.
And David, I just want to say though, that powerful question you said there, when we ask our inner child, that part of our mind, why do you believe that? Is that the truth? Normally, the first thing the inner child will throw up is all the evidence it's gathered to prove the point. So it'll reel off how it was mistreated in childhood, or how it's had failed relationships, or how it had difficulties in your last job, all the kind of evidence, the confirmation bias evidence that our ego, our inner child gathers to build a wall of protection around this lie.
Well, there's two things you said there, Alex, and I want to take those apart. That's why the golden thread is so powerful, because when you've done it to your inner child, you come to the very first belief, as you quite rightly said. I'm just going to make this up. Well, if my parents loved me, they wouldn't have treated me the way that they did. That must mean I'm unlovable. That doesn't mean that at all. So you've, as I said earlier, you've constructed a belief with no evidence. It's just something you've made up. They treated you in the way that they treated you because that's how they were treated. So they're not doing it because there's something wrong with you. They're doing it because simply they don't know better, for instance. That could be one reason. And once you have that core belief, such as I'm not good enough, then what happens? You start to act from that belief. And this is why this teaching is so important. It then becomes harmful because now you look at the evidence which proves you right. You dismiss all the evidence that is contrary, all the good things that happen to you. You just take for granted your health, your well-being, that you're growing, that you're maturing. You forget all that. That doesn't matter. And you look just at the negative side, and it becomes, your word is confirmation biased. You're confirming a negativity. And then, as we started off at the beginning of this teaching, that language, that dialogue, that becomes part of you. And without you realizing it until now, this becomes your inner dialogue. This is what you're saying to yourself. You're actually creating a reality. This is so important. You create a reality where it's so difficult for you to be successful. Because if you were successful, you're kind of proving yourself wrong. Does that make sense?
It's perverse.
It's perverse. And that's why it's so harmful. So please, today, just after this teaching, switch off whatever you're listening to. And for the next half an hour, be mindful of what you're saying to yourself about your life, about today, about your family, about your career, about your friendships, about your relationships, about you, your abilities, your skill set, how you do things. And notice, perhaps get a piece of paper and have 2 columns, positive, negative, and tick every thought. And you'll be amazed. You'll be amazed. And that's why it's harmful. And that's why to change it, you can't change all these bottom dominoes because you'll be at it for a lifetime. You have to find your way back to the first domino, correct that, and then the opposite happens. Once you put the first domino to be truthful, honest, having integrity, you're honoring and respecting your spirituality, now you start doing the opposite. And instead of being in the extremes, you start to come into your flow. And that's why this teaching is so vital. And as I always say, because I really believe it, if you doubt yourself in any way, this is what we're talking about. This is part of the negativity. So please start to believe in yourself. If you believed in yourself half as much as I believed in you, we'd be halfway there. So this is the time that you can make these changes. And here's the last thing I'm going to say. You can do this for yourself. You don't have to involve anybody else. Don't tell anybody else. Just do it for yourself because you're worth it. How about that? Can you say that to yourself? Because I'm worth it. And I believe you are.
Thank you, David. Well, I hope you have enjoyed this teaching. I will put a link in the show notes to other long-form teachings and a few guided meditations that will help you with this journey and as to correcting and managing your self-talk. Please let us know if you've enjoyed the teaching and perhaps share it with someone else who you think it may also benefit. David works every week with clients all over the world via Zoom video call on exactly these sorts of issues. If you'd like to learn more about David's one-to-one consultations, I'll also put a link to those in the show notes. And finally, don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. We produce new long-form teachings every Saturday, as well as 2 midweek short snippets of wisdom for you. So don't forget to subscribe. We look forward to sharing with you again very soon. Bye-bye.